Hello and welcome to another lighting diagram lesson. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and today we're talking about Louise Lefevre's portrait, also known as Madame Paul Escudier by John Singer Sargent. Before I start, if you want to start making your own lighting diagrams for free, you can get my free Filmmaker Tools template that's right up here with all these tools already made, ready to use in diagramming from my Patreon, patreon.com/Trenton Hoshiko. The link to the file directly will be in the video's description. And like I said, it is completely free, and that template is for Draw.io, which is a free and open source diagramming software that I think works really well for filmmaking diagrams. While you're there, if you do want to join, I have free and paid tiers that start at just $2. The free tiers tell you when I upload new videos, and the paid tiers help support the work that I'm doing to teach about cinematography and micro-budget filmmaking in general. I really appreciate everybody who's already gone over there and joined. Thank you so much for your support. To start off, this painting has two main light sources. We have this window right here, and we have the window that is behind her. Now the cool thing about this, to me, is that we have the alternating light dark pattern that I love to talk about. So here we have the light of the window, then we have dark right here of the shadow of the space behind her that's not being illuminated by the window. Then we have her face on her left, our camera right, that is illuminated by the window. Then we have the dark side of her face where the light doesn't wrap around because she's kind of standing, in line with it. And that's dark, but that dark area is positioned against the lightness of the window behind her. And then once again, we enter into the dark space of the wall. So it's light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, but on all these different planes, because the wall back here is on a different plane than the window, which is a different plane than her face. Her face's left and right sides are on the same plane, of course, but then we once again have the background plane for that darkness, and then a even further foreground plane, or at least sort of in line with her, for the window on the right. And I think that makes there be a lot of depth in this composition, while also allowing us to have that edge contrast, because her hair kind of disappears into the darkness up at the top of her head right here. And the dark side of her face is contrast against the light on the camera left side. And so she's kind of like positioned between these two windows, but in three-dimensional space, rather than, if this was made with her standing against this wall flat on, window on the left, window on the right, then she would get, kind of an edge light across her cheeks on both sides, and then the center of her would be dark. It would be a completely different painting in terms of how we're using those two windows and the composition. This is a much more interesting composition in my opinion. And so that light is pretty generally coming right to left, almost straight across. We do get a little bit of wrap, which tells me that this window is probably like, 3 feet wide or something, and like 1 to 2 of those feet are in front of her. The current itself is softening that light some, so the shadows that we have like on her chest, for example, aren't incredibly hard, but we don't have really any fill on the left side, so the shadows are still pretty dense, even though they're slightly softened in terms of their edges. This chair that's right behind her is getting pretty much all of the light from the window coming in at it. So I would say that she's probably, I said, if it's a 3-foot window, she might be at like 1 foot or 1.5 feet into it. So if she's in the center, we have a little bit that's ahead of her to wrap around some of that light, and we have plenty behind her to allow the light in to fall onto this chair. Because I think this chair is being primarily lit by the foreground window. And our background is really dark. It is definitely underexposed, and kind of the brightest area is right here where we have the light from the window coming in and hitting it. Closer to the wall and the window, it's being blocked by the curtains themselves, but a little bit further in, we are getting that cast on there, but it is pretty quickly falling off again, and you can see especially above how quickly it falls off. And just in terms of direction of the shadow, you can see the chair right here having that shadow kind of coming straight across. But that light is still being softened. It's not an incredibly hard shadow. It's not incredibly dense. Pretty much the densest part of this image is on her right side, our camera left, where we do want to have it be quite dark. So she's standing forward of the chair. The chair is a little bit behind her. If you were looking straight onto the window, the right side of the window would be getting more of the illumination where it's coming from, in my opinion, and that would be how you get this mark on the wall over here from this window behind her. It's unclear to me if there's any other light source in the room. If you look at the little mirror up here, it doesn't appear that there's another window after this one. So there is a little bit of a kind of an artistic manipulation of how bright this area is probably. And it definitely just gets darker as we fall back into the background of this painting. Like with much of Singer Sargent's paintings that I really enjoy to look at, the shadow work here is really incredible because you're balancing these lights and darks and this kind of almost movement of shape that I really like. And the dress down here has that a lot as well. I did a Sargent a while back and talked about how some of those shadows being brought down on the face really helped shape the actual like portraiture of this. And I would say that this painting falls pretty similarly in that same category. This is not a incredibly traditional portrait. We're not, you know, having a very even light, close to medium shot portraiture. This is a full body portrait that's standing farther away. She's partially in the dark. This is definitely a little bit more creative, expressive, and different than a lot of the traditional portraiture, especially of this time. So let's build this out. This back window is just a couple feet away from the wall. So I'm trying to get that kind of close. And then we have a bit of a gap. I would say that that gap is almost equal to the size of the windows, approximately. And so we end up with a room shape that's sort of like this. Now let's go and add a chair here, out there. And you know, that chair is there so you can look out the window. And we're gonna make sure that that's kind of behind where she will be. And she's pretty close to the window. She's like probably almost elbow touching the wall. So that means her other side is probably like, you know, 2.5 feet or so from the wall. She's pretty close. And then that chair is a little bit further from her. It's probably 3 to 4 feet away from the wall. So something like this is how I would imagine the setup works. First thing we need to do is have our light coming in our window and our path associated with that. So like I said, I want the window light to be coming from the right side of the window if you were facing it from the inside of the space. So just like this a little bit, that way we can get just wrapped around her face ever so slightly, but I want it to be mostly coming across. And we must keep in mind that the actual curtains themselves, the black curtains or bluish curtains that are right here, kind of creating the frame of that window light, not the actual softening, you know, kind of linen lacy material right there, will block some of the light. That's why we get this dark area right between. If we weren't getting this dark area, then we wouldn't have that, you know, dark light pattern nearly as well, because this wouldn't be dark enough. So instead of kind of having the frame of the window itself being the blocking factor here, I am just knowing that this is coming from that curtain and that actual like set design aspect. And I'd say that we have a very similar setup over here. This window might have more or less fabric here to change how, you know, the darkness of this back area works. But you see how the corner is dark right here and see how we don't get any light in this corner right here. That's, you know, approximately what we were expecting. And we get a little bit of a hot spot several feet forward on the wall from the window. So something like that. And you can kind of see this area right here on the ground where you do have a little bit of a lightness coming from that window. So let's place our camera, and that's gonna go about here. We are slightly off angle to the wall. The wall is going, if you see right here, we have this kind of leading line back to here. That corner of the room is sort of the center of our frame, or, you know, just maybe slightly left of center. And we have that leading line that drives our eye through her into the space. And we do actually have, therefore, this back wall line also angled pointing towards her as well. And so the camera would be somewhere right around here. This is, in my opinion, a rarely normal looking lens. So we'd be in the range of about 50 millimeters. Our goal really is to get the floor to ceiling, not even just a head to toe, but a floor to ceiling look out of this. And so we would need to have some curtains to help light this. The lamps that we would be using would be outside of these windows. This could be shot on location in a space that you rent, or this could be shot on a stage with a space that you build, but you would have your lamps out here to be illuminating those windows. You could do something like this with the sun if you timed things correctly, but you wouldn't have nearly as much control in how you got it to work. Do also note that the pathway for that forward window goes right over the chair, just like what you're hoping for. Her body itself is what's creating the darkness of her right side, our camera left side. And so if you have curtains that you can use for this, this could be as simple as this to set up. Depending on your budget, and if you are trying to actually be outside or compete with outside, you might need this to be a more powerful lamp, something more of like a flagship aperture model. But you could probably make this work with several of the GVM models as well, tungsten lights, as long as you balance the color appropriately. You will need a good amount of light because what's going around in here has been diffused by these curtains. And I would say that these curtains are pretty like tied together. So this is just actually a soft source. This is almost like a soft box in its own right, or a silk that we've placed right next to her. So we're not seeing the outside actually. And so I wouldn't say that you would need to put diffusion on the outside, because your diffusion can come solely from the actual like set design of how these windows are being draped with, this white linen diffusion material. If you did have it peeking open, if you did have a little bit of the outside, if you did want it to be more diffused, then I would then take some silks and put those in front of the light, or a larger diffusion frame, maybe like a 4x4 or something, and put that in front of the window itself. But I don't think that that is required here, as long as you're getting enough of the diffusion from the curtains while having enough power to illuminate the whole space. So this really could be as simple as you go with it. If you wanted to go a little bit more in depth, you could take something like a wag flag and put it on the far side of her. She's not getting really any edge light or something bouncing off the walls in here. These walls appear to be, a dark brown tone, and so we're not getting anything bouncing off. But if you want to just deepen that shadow, you can take a wag flag and just have some negative fill on this side of her to try to pull these shadows down even further and not have any extra bounced light coming back. I would be careful with that because you don't want to darken the chair too much. This edge on the far left of our frame still is having some illumination to it, but that is something that you could do to help bring this down just a little bit. Similarly, if we aren't getting enough exposure ultimately then in the space, you could use something like a space light. I'd probably put the space light towards the middle of the room. That way you can have it be very omnidirectional, and that would be mostly geared towards illuminating the space and making sure you can control that contrast of that light dark light pattern. So having a space light there, you'd probably have to boom it. It could be just out of frame on the left of the frame here, but having something to just kind of create a very even lightening of some of that shadows would probably be important, because otherwise you're having a really stark contrast between these windows and the walls that are not being illuminated at all. And this is just kind of to simulate some of that light bouncing around in the room. Similarly, you could use something like bounces to help bring some of that light back into the space. You could put that just, outside of frame back here to bounce some of that light back into the space, and so it's not just, falling off then. That would really depend on the kinds of space that you're filming in, especially if it is a stage versus if it's a location. And so the bounce here would be to help bring some back into the chair itself, while also making sure that we're not bouncing it back onto her, because we want to have that dark side there. And there even is some artistic manipulation here in that her face's shadow on her right side isn't as dark as her hip. The bounces and the wag flag negative fill are going to help us control that contrast and control how much light is spreading around in the room. The space light also helps us achieve the exposure that we want, while making it very omnidirectional and even lighting all around, so that we don't have that competing with our lamps outside of the space casting into the room. Our main goal here is to make sure our frame allows us to have that light be motivated by these windows, diffused by these curtains, and have our actress have her face be shaped by the light coming from those two windows. We don't want to have too much on the inside here that competes with the shaping that we're getting from the windows themselves. And especially if she, came from our camera left, walked in, looked out that window, and then walked up here, we're creating these kinds of pockets of light. We actually have two wholly separate pockets of light, one at the back here and one at the front, and that helps us create that mise-en-scène a little bit and make that space more dynamic. This space light placement here also would help us control the darkness of this middle area between the two windows. We don't want to be completely blacked out, because even here, the darkness of that middle area is still, in my opinion, less dark than the side of her dress. And so here we have two different but pretty similar methods. The cheaper one over here would be to have two lamps, and the option on the left here has a little bit more control in terms of your ability to expose and your ability to control the contrast, especially on the subject. This one would take a little bit more labor and a little bit more setup and a little bit more equipment. This one would give you less control but save you a little bit of money. So it really depends on what your needs are for your specific shot. I personally love hiding diffusion with things like curtains like this. I think it's really cool and I think it's really effective. It helps bring the viewer into the scene itself. And I think it's very important to talk about creating pockets of light for your actors to actually play within. We have the one on the back and we have the one in the front. So like I said, if she walked through, we would get this illumination on her right side of the face facing our camera as she walked up to this window. And then as she turned, she would step forward and she would enter darkness as she reached between the two windows. And then once again, enter into the light, but only on one side of her face once again. But if she was walking straight towards this window, we wouldn't have been able to perceive the dark side of her face in the same way that we are in that final standing position. So it's just like, ways to think about how your space and your lighting interact with each other and how that interacts with the blocking of the movement through your scene is something that's super important. Like I said at the beginning, if you want my free Filmmaker Tools template, I have a link for that down in the video description. It is completely free. You don't have to sign up or do anything. But if you do want to join or support on Patreon, that'd be super cool. If you like lighting diagram videos like this, where I talk about how we can use reference images and how we can think through diagramming and setting up scenes for micro-budget filmmaking, you can subscribe. I have so many more of these lighting diagrams, as well as lots of regular cinematography videos, including techniques, equipment, and DIY builds coming up real soon, and I'm super excited. I'm really aiming to get to 1,500 subscribers. I'd love if you join me on that journey. And if you did like this video in particular, please give it a like down below. That helps me reach new viewers with the YouTube algorithm who also like these kinds of videos. If you want to pick up equipment like what we've talked about here to make a scene like this, I do have affiliate links down in the video description. Those help support these videos at no extra cost to you. This week, if you can go out of your way to do something kind for somebody, please take that opportunity. You don't know how much it'll mean for you and for them. And kindness can be simple. It can be just listening to a friend. It can be giving a homeless person $5. It can be helping your coworker through a task that they're being challenged by, but you know how to do. Kindness takes so many forms. Please take care of yourselves, take care of your people around you, take care of your community. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful week ahead of you. Peace.